Hey there, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back. I'm your host, PattSun, and today we're gonna be taking a look at r/surviving infidelity, where a cheating girlfriend is hell-bent on forcing OP to take her back. Let's begin. She showed up at my parents' place after I left her on red. Posted by Reddit user Stamford Lioness.
TLDR, the love of my life, at least I thought she was caught cheating by me after returning early from a business trip. I and my now ex-girlfriend were together since we were 14 and 15 respectively. We were each other's first everything. Our relationship was a near fairy tale for the most part. She was the perfect girlfriend I could have asked for. A few aberrations over all those years, in form of arguments, none your regular healthy couple couldn't relate with, and as infrequent as they could have come, are all that kept it from being a perfect relationship. To set the context, we recently celebrated her business's previous quarter's financials with a vacation in Mykonos. This was in early October, just over a couple of months ago. It was all perfect as perfect could be. Our relationship was in cruise control. It was all solid, right up until the end of October of this year. She used to surprise me with these weekend getaways, dates, and gifts. Nothing too fancy, but just about enough to make me melt. Then none of it for well over a month, nada. She's initiated physical intimacy the most out of us both. She's always had a higher libido than I, again, none of that for over a month. I had no reason to suspect anything and just brushed it off by attributing it to her work stress. She's been working her ass off for the past 6 years to build the aforementioned business that has finally started paying off its dividends. Of all these changes in the status quo of our relationship, what stuck out the most by far was an incident that happened earlier in November. She was out for a night of pub crawl with her girlfriends. Soho pub crawls are kind of a ritual with them. The usual chinwag over drinks. She wanted me to go along, but I couldn't as my local football team was playing that evening, and being a season ticket holder, I rarely miss their games, if at all. That being said, I've joined in as well as sat out these crawls multiple times over the years. She's almost always acquiesced to me being at a football game over almost any event that's ever clashed with it. Red flag number 1. I get back home just around midnight after heading over to my sister's for a couple pints after the match. She texted me she'd be late and asked me to not stay up and that her friend, let's call her A, would drop her off. I stayed up anyway and texted A, who's their group's designated driver by the virtue of her sobriety to drive safely. Imagine my surprise when it said my ex-girlfriend had left the crawl earlier and had informed her that she'd be taking a cab home, much against her girlfriend's protests. Her cab finally pulled up in front of our house at about 2 a.m. Went in for a kiss when she got back home. To my horror, she turned away and made her way to our bed and passed out. Never had she ever turned down a kiss from me up until at that point in time. I brushed it off to her being absolutely pissing drunk and let it slide. The next morning, I asked her about returning home in a cab even though it was supposed to be dropping her off. She responded by saying that she couldn't stay there any longer, owing to a terrible headache, and decided to book a cab back home so as to not want her girlfriends having to call it an early night. Now, it takes a maximum of an hour in peak London traffic to get over to our house from Soho. If her timeline is to be believed, she was in the cab for almost 4 hours. She could see me trying to piece it together but quickly went in for a kiss. My naivete, coupled with love, took over and I went on with the rest of my day without giving it a second thought. Red flag number 2. Fast forward 3 weeks. I tried getting on her Instagram to delete a story featuring me in an embarrassing pose that she posted and teased me over. We have always known each other's social media logins and passwords to all devices. I tried logging into her Instagram by putting in her username and password, to no avail. She got a notification and knew I tried to log in on her account. Gave me a wry smile and revealed she'd changed her password in anticipation of me trying to log in and deleting that story. Fair enough, I would go on to accept this version. What I couldn't really wrap my head around was her removing her Instagram profile photo she's had for the past 7 years, featuring the both of us and updating it with a solo photo of herself. I was hurt, but again, my naivete led me to believe it was much ado about nothing. Red flag number 3, D-Day 1. As December was upon us, I was supposed to travel to India, China, and Singapore on a business assignment. My company was to send me over for 26 days, as that's what we'd estimated the maximum time frame to be allocated for the project by factoring in the worst-case scenarios. We'd never been away from each other for this long. She was distraught, from what I could tell she genuinely was, but accepted me going away for that long after a night of us cuddling and crying our eyes out. The next few days were rough for us both. The time zone misalignment restricted us to a limited amount of FaceTime. D-Day was just 2 weeks into December. On a FaceTime call, I saw what looked like a bra on the floor and immediately recognized it wasn't hers, owing to its color. I asked her about it and she tried to angle the camera such that it was no longer visible and deliberately moved over to that space and pointed the camera at the floor. Of course it was no longer there, she has to have kicked it out of sight. My heart was trying its best to dispel any notions of some other girl being there with her, but my eyes wouldn't let me unsee what they saw. I couldn't sleep that night. Red flag number 4, D-Day 2. I'd never gotten over her hiding that bra on the floor from my sight. By this point, doubt was starting to rear its ugly head in. My project was over almost a week before it was expected to. Decided to surprise her with an early homecoming. My cab from the airport was possibly the longest one I ever had to take, or at least it felt like it. All I was thinking of on my ride back home was her kiss I'd been deprived of for weeks, but I'd be lying if I told you I couldn't sense an impending doom in the back of my mind thanks to that FaceTime call. I reach home with a box of chocolates and wine. Let myself in without any noise so as to surprise her. All good up until this point. Hear the shower running. I was in half a mind to join her in there but decided against it in favor of planting myself at the door and recording her reaction on my camera. Weirdly enough, our bedroom door opens and there she is wrapped in a towel, about to hit the shower. My mind couldn't comprehend why she'd left the shower and steam running before getting in. But then all pieces were beginning to fall into place when she saw me and her face turned pale in trepidation, almost as if she were looking at a ghost and not the girl she's loved all this time. I yell hey and rush into her for a kiss. We kiss but there's absolutely no reciprocation from her end. Here's how it played out after I pulled away and she was still looking at me in shock without saying a word. Babe, are you okay? Why are you looking at me like that and why's the shower running? You were supposed to come back after Christmas. Words cannot express how gutted I was the moment she would utter these exact words after us being apart for weeks. Just as I was about to tell her I finished my work earlier than expected, I heard a girl's voice calling out her name from the shower. My legs started shaking at the very moment. Something I'd only ever seen other people write or say was happening to me. We burst out crying. I slumped against the wall by the bathroom as it started to dawn upon me that the supposed love of my life, a girl with whom I'd envisioned growing old, was about to jump into the shower with another girl. She rushed in, asked the other girl to get dressed and escorted her out of our house. I barely got a look at the absolute vixen that turned my life upside down, the she-devil, for whom my ex-girlfriend decided to throw away over a decade of memories. She got down beside me and burst into tears, apologizing profusely. I pushed her away and she hit her head on the bedside table. Was the only time either of us ever got violent. Despite that, she refused to stay away and came back and trying to wrap herself around me. For the next couple of hours it was more of the same, her being apologetic, groveling, and me crying to the point of passing out on the floor. She picked me up, put me on the bed and went out to fix me some tea. I locked her out and sunk back into the bed for another bout of tears, all this while her trying to explain her actions from the other side of the door. Now comes the worst part of it all. I was rummaging through the wardrobe for our spare stash of marijuana to calm myself down and realize the gravity of what had transpired. I found a ring with our initials carved onto it and a receipt towards down payment for the house we're currently renting, which made her digression hit harder. The girl, the love of my life, was about to make me hers for the rest of our lives. So close, yet so far. The aftermath. She admitted to having slept with the other girl, the absolute wretched woman she met with on that pub crawl on multiple occasions. She won't let me leave the house and instead moved out to the guest bedroom to give me space. I haven't so much as let her touch me ever since that fateful morning. She doesn't know that I know about her plan or what's left of it to propose me. I keep trying to get her to open up over why she'd sell our future for a meaningless fling, but all she has to say for herself is that she doesn't know why she did it. She's completely cut off ties with the other girl. I know for a fact that she was nothing more than a fling to her. Yet, I don't think I can ever get over a betrayal this immense. What am I looking for here? I am almost certain that I want to leave her. The only sliver of dread that's holding me back is the fact that I will never love any other girl the way I loved her. This could perhaps change, but if I were a betting lady, I'd not bet against it. There will always be that what if I'd given her another chance in the back of my mind, no matter which girl I end up with in the future, if at all. She seems to be truly remorseful of her actions. She's been an absolute peach of a girlfriend before this, arguably more so than I ever was. Makes me wonder if I'm to blame a wee bit. If I tagged along with her to the bloody pub crawl and she'd never have met the other girl. Has anyone here ever been betrayed by who they thought was the love of their life and yet went on to live out that happily ever after? I'm dead inside and devoid of tears at this point as I write this and ask myself whether I was really not good enough for her. Feels like I've lost in life. Now for OP's first update. Over these past few days, I tried my hardest to forgive her and move past her digression, but I just couldn't. The one girl who had the privilege of my out-and-out trust decided to break it by letting her temporary carnal desires get the best of her. She's done everything she possibly could to stop me from leaving her for good. But yesterday the gravity of her actions probably manifested itself when she finally acquiesced to the fact that getting me to go back to loving her the way I used to is a fool's errand. To her credit, she didn't throw the cheater's book at me, contrary to the belief across quite a bit of posters on my previous post. Never labeled her actions to be a mistake. She still maintains that she doesn't know the true reason behind her actions, except for wanting to experience the feeling of being with someone else who's not me. She'd back up anything and everything I'd tell to both sets of parents. She was okay with losing our mutual friends if it meant I'd stay. Her deal's always been, paint me a cheater all you want, however you want, as long as you don't leave me. She told me about her plan to propose me on my birthday. Probably was one of the last-ditch attempts to get me to reconsider, I don't know. I never told her I'd already found out about the ring and the deposit she put down in our house. Breaks me as it'll forever be a painful reminder of us being almost over the finish line. Yesterday, I had her sit down to convey my decision of wanting to break up. Needless to say, a lot of crying and screaming ensued on both sides. She thought I'd lost the plot. I won't get into the details, partly because it feels like I'd relive them and partly because I'm absolutely knackered, but suffice to say, it's been the worst day of my life bar none, yes, more so than the day I caught her with that absolute minger, the little trollop who thinks it's okay to destroy people's lives as long as it satiates her thirst for girls committed to others. Evoked emotions I didn't know of. No, it wasn't a weight lifted off my shoulder, like someone commented under the previous post. If anything, the hurting's gotten stronger, manifold. At this point, only 2 friends of ours know what's happened. We're yet to involve others, including our families. I'm trying to think of ways to break the news such that our parents and friends wouldn't absolutely hate her. Any help in this regard would be appreciated. Our lives are so intertwined at this point that almost everyone we mutually know are all we know of, friends or not. I don't want her being made a pariah in our circle for that very reason. I know what I just said makes me sound like a right pillock, but I still love her and always will. I don't know when I'll move out yet, but I imagine it would be very soon because my parents wouldn't let me stay with her for too long, if at all, once they are made aware of the proper roller coaster my life's been over the past few weeks. Lastly, I was overwhelmed by the support I received on the previous post, both in form of comments and messages. I wasn't able to respond to and read through many for obvious reasons, but thank you anyway for reaching out. As I'm about to close what would probably end up being the most beautiful chapter of my life, despite it having gotten poignant towards the end. I wish no one who's reading this has to experience my ordeal, and if you already have, I'm sorry, I feel your pain. And now, for OP's second update. My ex-girlfriend cheated on me 25F. I won't get into the details because they make me want to cry. I moved out of the house we were living together in about a week ago. I didn't block her across any platform because she's been absolutely downcast and despondent ever since I put my foot down and gathered courage to move out. By far the toughest task I've endured, but as days pass, I'm starting to realize it needed doing. We had been texting back and forth, however, my intent to curb the frequency and ultimately go no contact was palpable enough for her to call me incessantly and beg to come back, even at odd hours of the day. Just to give you an idea of what was happening. The few times I wouldn't respond to her within minutes, for whatever reason, she would call me until I was back online. Note that I never left her on read. I've always had to tend to other matters, which is why I couldn't respond to her texts. The one time I did was because I was absolutely knackered from an intense swim session, in want of a proper sleep, something I'd sorely lacked of late. I'll be honest, I couldn't be asked to text her back and decided to hit the sack as I could barely keep my eyes open. Soon enough, my phone starts going off. I put it on silent and snoozed off. What does she do? Drive straight over to my parents' place. Been staying with them since I moved out, absolutely plastered and reeking of wine. Fuck knows how she managed to drive in that state across central London of all places. My parents were still up streaming some TV series, which was put to a stop by her unabating banging, ringing, and screaming my name. Mum rushed in to let me know she was at the door. I walked out to my father and her engaged in a heated exchange. This was the moment I completely lost all the residual love for her. I'd never seen her in a state that pitiful. Showing up at my parents' house to hatch an absolutely avoidable drama over being left on read ensured she'd decided to forgo whatever little goodwill from them she'd held on to. This was the woman, with her own set of keys to my parents' house not too long ago. They absolutely adored her, at times a wee bit more than their own daughter. It moved me to tears watching the girl I was once smitten with, resorting to make an ass out of herself and being reduced to a shell of her former self. Hours of arguments later, I drove her back to what was once our house, made sure she wouldn't choke and put her to sleep. Called her parents to let them know what she'd done, who promptly drove over and apologized for her actions. If you ask me, the worst part of this by far was watching her parents, who have always treated me like a daughter, weep. I'm not a parent, but I couldn't think of too many worser things than watching your daughter you've been proud of her entire existence come off a cheater in a long-term relationship and stoop lower by showing up pissing drunk at her ex's place, all in a span of few days. If I go entirely no contact, I don't know what she would do to herself. I've been trying to convince her to seek therapy, but she wouldn't listen. I asked her to move in with her parents for some time, to which she's agreed, but I don't know if that's a permanent solution. Going no contact with her is proving to be an insurmountable task for me. How do I help her heal and at the same time go no contact? Does one slowly withdraw or pull the plug right away? I'm so confused.
OP, you need to go no contact with her. She's disgusting. She's gross. She cheated on you and didn't care. If you never caught her, she would have never told you and could have possibly brought back God knows what disease and potentially made you sick. OP, come on. You don't need to help her heal. She cheated on you, destroyed over 10 years of happy memories. Stop parenting her and call the police next time. I'll bet real money that if you stop calling her back and stay cold from any communication, she will stop harassing you. Grow a damn spine. Viewer support is the best way for me to remain independent and continue bringing you these daily videos, which will always be here on my channels for you to watch absolutely free. So please consider subscribing to me on Rumble and on YouTube. Both will be linked in the description box down below. Thanks for listening, everyone. If you even somewhat enjoyed today's story, make sure to give this video a thumbs up, and if you really like it, consider subscribing to PattSun to never miss a future upload. Stay strong.